The paintwork of the body, traditionally for Japanese cars, is not of the best quality and is vulnerable to minor damage, scratches and chipping. Quite often, there are such troubles as swelling of paint. Most often, the following parts come under repainting: the hood, roof edges, fenders, doors, and trunk lid. The absence of chips on the body is a sure sign that the car was tinted. Given the fact that many instances have repainted parts, in order to determine whether the car was restored after an accident, you need to pay attention to the state of the gaps. After removing the plastic body kit, installing it back, having to withstand all the gaps is unrealistic. There are also complaints about the corrosion resistance of the Mitsubishi Outlander XL body. Despite the presence of galvanization, the places of chips bloom quite intensively, so it is better not to delay the elimination of defects. In fairness, it should be noted that there is no talk of through corrosion yet, but the fact that there is a problem is rather unpleasant. For cars operated as a full-fledged CUV, special attention must be paid to the bottom of the suspension attachment points, especially the front suspension cups and the joints of the side member. In addition, due to the small thickness of the metal, the rigidity of the body for this class is clearly insufficient. The camber settings of the rear wheels quickly get lost. Among other troubles, it is worth highlighting the chrome plate body trim elements. They're afraid of meeting with reagents. They become cloudy and covered with ulcers. The protective plastic of the optics cloudy and the windshield are not resistant to external influences, especially on pre-styling specimens. In addition, if the body is skewed, the glass may burst. Buying original glass is not a cheap pleasure, so many prefer an analogs, $500 branded and $150 to $100 non-original. When buying, consider this fact to check the glass markings. There may be problems with the glass of the rear doors, warp over time. If there is a problem, the seal is jammed. You can also note not too high-quality plastic, which becomes very hardy in winter and can break even from slight contact with an obstacle. Quite early attention may be required by the trapezium of the wipers begins to wedge and door seals. Roll forks are quite reliable and as a rule disturb only over trifles. The main complaints of the owners of cars with these internal combustion engines are caused by excessive noise of operation, chirping of nozzles, whistling of the driving belt, and the presence of vibrations. Among the shortcomings, it is worth highlighting the short service life of the elements of the ignition system, especially for owners who save on fuel. On a run of 120–150,000 kilometers, the metal timing chain and the crankshaft oil seal need to be replaced. After 200,000 kilometers, valve guides and seats require attention, the wear of which leads to an increase in oil consumption and cocking of the piston group with the occurrence of rings. If the internal combustion engine has overheated, the disease may appear much earlier. A 2.4-liter engine with high mileage due to a decrease in oil pressure has risks of damage to the crankshaft, liners and connection rods. Since hydraulic compensators were not provided for these motors, once every 80–100,000 kilometers it is necessary to adjust the valves. For cars with HBO, the same procedure should be carried out more often, since there is a risk of valve freezing and burnout. The resource of the piston group is about 350,000 kilometers. In practice, a 3-liter engine turned out to be less problematic, but it is more expensive to maintain and consumes much more fuel. Unlike the younger motors of the line, the timing drive of this internal combustion engine uses a belt with a recommended replacement interval of 90,000 kilometers. However, experienced owners recommend changing it after 70,000 kilometers. It should be noted that if oil gets on the belt, its resource is significantly reduced. On a run of 120,000 kilometers or more, you need to monitor the condition of the oil pump, as its performance deteriorates over time, which leads to a decrease in the resource of moving parts. Lambda sensors, hydraulic lifters and a catalyst, which begins to crumble after 150,000 kilometers, can also be attributed to weaknesses. Quite often, owners blame the leakage of gaskets and engine seals. Another disadvantage is the tendency of the motor to overheat, but due to the fact that weak radiators were used here, which in the heat do not always cope with their duties. In instances with a mileage of 200,000 plus kilometers, the camshaft, their bed and rocker arms have significantly signs of wear. For cars manufactured before 2008, due to unfinished firmware, there are computer failures. The engine can respond to pressing the gas pedal with a delay of 3–6 seconds. 3 types of transmissions are available for Mitsubishi Outlander XL: 5-speed manual transmission, 6 automatic Jetco JF613E and CVT Jetco JF11E. The machines are very reliable, but on this model it is quite rare. The main problems of manual transmissions are usually caused by a decrease in the oil level in the box, so the amount of lubricant must be constantly monitored. A lot depends on the operating conditions. So, for example, if you often sleep in snow or mud, by 200,000 kilometers you will need to replace the synchronizers and differential, the jamming of which inevitably leads to destruction of the box body. For cars with a mileage of about 150,000 kilometers, the lever backstage bushing and clutch kit need to be replaced. The classic automatic is also reliable. Unlike mechanics, this box is very sensitive to oil clean lines, and due to the fact that when the torque converter clutches wear out, a large amount of chips gets into the lubricant, it needs to be changed as often as possible, every 40–50,000 kilometers. If the oil is rarely changed in the box, the friction wear products will clog the solenoids and channels of the valve body, which leads to a decrease in pressure and oil starvation of the automatic transmission. Depending on the quality of service, the machine runs to 300,000 kilometers. The reliability of the Jetco JF11E variator has been discussed many times, since it is found on many Japanese cars, reviews of which are on our website, Dodge Caliber, Nissan Qashqai, X-Trail, etc. If we briefly analyze the reliability of this gearbox in the Mitsubishi Outlander XL, then with the 2-liter engine, the variator usually does not cause problems up to 250,000 kilometers. Of course, if you do not forget to change the oil and filter every 40,000 kilometers and also carefully operate the car. But in conjunction with more powerful engines, the variator serves less. Due to the high power, the service life of the box bearings is reduced, and by 150,000 kilometers, the belt wears out and scuffs appear on the cones. A signal of the presence of malfunctions is the appearance of vibrations and howling during operation. Damage to the belt and cones is manifested by rusted sounds and a decrease in acceleration dynamics. Failure to follow the recommendations of the oil change interval leads to a quick failure of the box oil pump, followed by an expensive repair of the variator. All-wheel drive versions of the Mitsubishi Outlander XL are equipped with the electronic friction clutch, which is activated when the front wheels slip. Rarely but still, there are also versions with permanently all-wheel drive SAWC, which was installed on cars intended for the Japanese market. If the car is not used as a full-fledged CUV with a transmission, there should not be any special problems. With intense slippage, the drive quickly overheats, after which the rear axle may twitch in turns. If you do not periodically change the lubricant in the Angel gearbox every 60–80,000 kilometers, the life of the bearings is significantly reduced. Once every 90–100,000 kilometers, the drive shaft outboard bearings need to be replaced. But CV joints, shafts and the cardan shaft do not without repair up to 200,000 kilometers. On the same run, there are failures in the operation of the clutch caused by damage to the wiring and the interior mode selection control. The Mitsubishi Outlander XL is endowed with the independent suspension with McPherson strut in front and the multi-link design in the rear. The chassis of this model is quite rigid. This is especially felt if you have experience in owning the CR-V or Qashqai. Another significant drawback is the excessive noise of the running gear, which is especially acute on a car without additional noise. As for the reliability of the suspension, it has an average service life compared to competitors. So, for example, the consumables of the front stabilizer need to be replaced every 30–50,000 kilometers, the rear every 60–80,000 kilometers. Shock absorbers on average last about 90,000 kilometers, but can start to leak much earlier. Rear shock absorbers with regular loads rarely withstand more than 60,000 kilometers. Ball bearings, depending on the operating conditions, go 80–100,000 kilometers, changes complete with the lever. Wheel bearings, support bearings and multi-link parts can do withstand replacement for 120–150,000 kilometers. With the preservation of the integrity of the anthers, the CV joints will last about the same. It is worth tightening with the replacement of wheel bearings as they are prone to jamming. But the resource of shock absorber springs can be disappointing. Even at medium loads, they begin to sag after 100,000 km. Of the shortcomings in this steering, one can only single out a large gear ratio, almost like the Volga, which affects the ease of driving in the city. But the steering consumables are not famous for their special endurance. The tips make themselves felt after 50,000 kilometers. The thrust, depending on the load, can withstand 100–150,000 kilometers. In the brake system, the hoses on the front axle too short, which is why they are stretched when the wheels are turned, and the guide pins of the calipers, if they are not periodically lubricated, turn sour, which is why the pads begin to wedge, require special attention. Another disadvantage is the short service life of consumables, as well as the tendency to overheat and deform discs. The interior can hardly be called the trade of the Mitsubishi Outlander XL, since a lot of hard plastic is used here, which in addition to being quite noisy, is also quickly overridden. The fastening elements of decorative panels and cabin mechanics do not have a large margin of safety: power windows, handles, microlift and all kinds of switches. There are also complaints about the quality of the soundproofing of the cabin, or rather its absence. The upholstery of the seats and the steering wheel braid lose their presentable appearance closer to 100,000 km. The steering column also failed at the same run, and for cars with electric drive, there is a play in the driver's seat cushion. It is worth noting that with unprofessional wet cleaning, the smell of mold may appear in the cabin, which is very difficult to get rid of. If there is moisture in the cabin, you need to check the condition of the plug from the oxygen sensor located under the central tunnel. It jumps off. Before buying, it would not be out of place to check the operability of the rear power windows, since, due to the unsuccessful design of the guides, the glass is often warped and they'd stop working. As for the reliability of the interior equipment and the electronics, there are a few problems here. The weak points include the short service life of the stove motor, the drives of seats and mirrors, the wipers and the buttons of the steering wheel. The snail ring of the loop is frayed. Also among the problematic ones, the wiring connectors, body position tracking sensor and the ALS power window unit, poorly protected from moisture. On fresh cars, there are often malfunctions in the operation of the EDACS switching control unit, the replacement of which will cost about $100. A unit malfunction leads to incorrect operation of the alarm, audio system and backlight. For cars with a mileage of more than 150,000 km, the condition of the generator should be checked, since by this time the bearings and slip rings were out. Incorrect operation of the generator leads to power surges and rapid burnout of the lamps. If you are the owner of this car model, please describe the problems that you had to face during the operation of the car. Perhaps it is your review that will help readers of our site when choosing a car.